Hey, what's on, guys? So welcome to my spoiler-free review of Iron Fist. So before I jump into this review, I want to talk about all the hate that's been going around for the series based on the early critic reviews and the hate on Finn Jones himself as the white Iron Fist and not the Asian Iron Fist. So if you don't already know, some of the critics like IGN were able to see the first 6 episodes of Iron Fist before it was officially released to the public. And they basically described the show as sluggish, boring, and Marvel's first failure. Next, Finn Jones, aka Danny Rand, aka the Iron Fist, was also being hated on Twitter because it was a white guy playing the Iron Fist and not some Asian dude. And even in the comics, it's Danny Rand is a white guy. The Iron Fist is a white guy, and there's only been one Asian guy to portray the Iron Fist. There's also a lot of political reasons behind this as to why people are hating on Finn Jones as the Iron Fist, but I won't jump into the whole political side of that. The critics also said that the first 6 episodes focused mostly on corporate conflicts, and most of the scenes took place in office buildings and didn't really focus much on the street problems. So because of these 2 reasons, everybody just hopped on the Iron Fist as a failure bandwagon. And I want to reassure you guys by saying that the critics are just a lot of closed-minded people that exaggerate how shitty the show is. In reality, it's a pretty damn good show, and I personally really enjoyed it. So if you're going into the series really with a lot of doubt, or if you're just avoiding the series altogether, you do not want to do that to yourself, because you're really missing out on a really great show. You're just robbing yourself of the opportunity to watch a really great show. So I would not go in that direction. I'll be honest, when I first heard about all this negativity on the show, I got a little bit skeptical, but then I decided, you know what, I'm going to go into the show without any prior judgment, just watching the show for the first time as if I didn't hear those reviews at all. And I think that's what a lot of you guys should do, for those of you that have read these reviews, just because you don't want to go with that mindset in and just assume the show is going to be shit, and then it just clouds all your actual judgment, and then you just see the show as a shitty show. So I don't want that to happen, you guys. But yeah, there's just been a lot of hate on the show before the show was even officially released. So I just want to tell all the people that hate the show to just fuck off, especially for those people who haven't seen the show at all, or have only seen half of the show, because most of these critics, or all of these critics that have reviewed the show up till now, have just reviewed half of the season. That's all they saw, and that's way too early to be saying if a show is shit or not. You have to watch through the whole season to decide that. But I just want to get that out of the way, so let's get started with our review. So Iron Fist is the 4th setup series for the Defenders. And it's basically about this guy, Danny Rand, who, when he was a kid, was the heir to the Rand Industries Corporation. And his parents died in a plane crash while they were on a trip to China. And Danny was the only remaining survivor. And he was found and taken in and trained by the monks of Kunlun, I think that's how you pronounce it. And he spent years training, and he was chosen to become the Iron Fist. And then 15 years later, he comes back to New York to take charge of the Rand industry and to defeat the Iron Fist's greatest enemy, the Hand. So first, I'm going to talk about what I actually really liked about this show. So first off, Finn Jones as the Iron Fist was probably the best casting that they've done for the show. I think he did an incredible job with all his acting and all the lines that he delivered. And you can tell that he trained a lot for this role based on all the complex fight choreography that they have. And I don't know what it is, but just Finn Jones's version of Danny Rand's character it's a lot of fun to watch. Danny Rand just seems like a likable guy at the beginning of the show, and from the moment you meet him, and you can tell, he has a really good heart and his intentions aren't bad. I don't know, in the beginning of the show, you can see that even though he's a member of Rand Industries and he's a billionaire, he doesn't take advantage of all the money that he has. He seems pretty humble, and he's always trying to help out people and not use his money for the wrong things. Next character which I really liked is Colleen Wing. I think this character was an absolute badass. She's just that kind of character it's like Elektra from Daredevil, but minus the killing and with more honor. I guess that's the best way to describe her. And the chemistry between her and Danny is just a lot of fun to watch on screen. And I'm not talking about their romantic chemistry. I'm talking about their chemistry on how they approach certain situations and how they work together so gracefully in combat. I think that those two just work together so well on screen, and I just loved watching that. The next would be the fight scenes. they'll remind you a lot of the Daredevil fight scenes, but with their own little twist with the whole Iron Fist formula on it. And personally, if you watch the show for only one reason, it has to be the fight scenes. They're just executed so well, and it's definitely the biggest selling point of the show. At least it was for me. When I watched this, it just blew me away. Specifically about the fight scenes when Danny uses the Iron Fist, I think that whole concept was just really cool in just how they implemented that into the show. It's kind of like how the Extremis was in Iron Man 3, but with their own version. And I think that really works with the show, with the whole like modernization and stuff, but I think they could have pushed that a little bit more with the mystical boundaries, but I'll touch more on that a little bit later. Next would be the villains of the story. So there's a couple of villains. I guess you could technically say there's 2 villains, but I'm only going to touch on one, which was revealed in the trailer, which is Madame Gao. And she poses a pretty big challenge for Danny, especially with her whole heroin trade deals that go around the city, how he has to deal with those, and then finding out other really deep information. So I think Madame Gao is a pretty good pick as one of the main villains for the show. Another villain is revealed later on in the show. It was actually a pretty good twist on how they pulled that villain off, or how they made this character into that villain. Before his character transformation, he pretty much gave me like a Norman Osborn vibe from how he, if you remember how Norman Osborn treated Peter in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, it's kind of how this character reminds me in relationship to Danny. So I think that kind of character works really well for this kind of show. I absolutely loved seeing that on screen, and they just pull it off in such a beautiful fashion, and it really forced other characters to develop in a really great way. So I'm really glad that they did something like this. Lastly, this is something a little bit extra, but I really enjoyed all the direct and indirect references that they made to the other Marvel shows. Some characters that have appeared in previous shows have appeared on the show. Specifically, Claire Temple has appeared. She's basically been on every show now. And they've also introduced another character from another show, which I will not mention for spoiler reasons, who's actually on the show. So those are the 2 characters that we actually see in person on the show that they refer to. And then they make a lot of indirect references to other characters, like from Daredevil and Luke Cage. They make a lot of Luke Cage references. So yeah, no, I think that was just a really, really cool to see, because I think this is Iron Fist is the one show that's made the most references to other shows compared to like Luke Cage or Jessica Jones. Daredevil really didn't have that. So, I mean, at this point, it's kind of expected since it's the 4th series. But I think it's just really cool to see how they just put that in there. It just adds a little bit more enjoyment to the show, at least for me personally. For things that I really didn't like about the show, I'm gonna say to a certain extent, the critics are correct about how sometimes how the show focuses too much on the corporate conflicts and on the office building scenes. To a certain extent, that kind of drags on, but for the most part, I felt engaged and I really wasn't bored. It was just some scenes that kind of dragged on more than they needed to. And even the scenes that they did that in, I get that they did it with a good intention. They're trying to build other characters up, but sometimes it just dragged on a little bit more than it actually needed to. Other things that I really didn't like was, well, actually, I don't want to say it's something I didn't really like. It's something that I wish that they pushed a little bit more than what they actually did on the show. And I'm talking about the whole Iron Fist concept and the whole magical, mystical backstory of Danny Rand. So there are moments on the show where they do show how some of Danny's life was on the show. Really, really small flashbacks, like maybe like a minute, 2 minute long, and that's it. And we get very little of that, but they do talk about it, but they never really show his life when he was training with the monks. And I think the reason for that is, I was reading an article about a year ago where they were talking about when the series was first announced, how Marvel was really skeptical about doing this kind of series because they've never pulled anything with like a magical or mystical character. So this is before Doctor Strange happened. So back then, everybody was worried that if we do this, it might turn out shit and then people won't like it. So Marvel really took the safe route with the whole magical, mystical concept in the show, at least from what I saw. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think they could have pushed it a little bit further, especially since Doctor Strange was a really big success. So I think they're definitely going to do that in the future seasons, especially since they've seen how good Doctor Strange was. So I think they definitely have a lot of potential to push that forward. Apart from pros and cons, some other extra things I want to touch on are, a lot of people whenever I read the comments for the trailers or just posts about Iron Fist, everyone's just like, is he gonna get the costume by the end of the season or just whenever? And the answer is no. He doesn't get the costumes this season. And Finn Jones actually explained why. He basically said that Daniel Ryan's character by the end of season 1 is not ready to put on an Iron Fist costume. He's still trying to figure himself out and other certain spoilerish things which I will not touch on, so he's not ready for that. But I think by the end of the Defender series, which comes out sometime this summer, I think by the time that series ends, I think you should have some kind of costume, or at least be in the process of making a new costume. Lastly, the ending of the final episode does set groundwork down for season 2, which is pretty much guaranteed to happen at this point. With all that said, Iron Fist is not a bad series, especially if you put aside all the bullshit, over-exaggerated information that the critics and the fans are doing for the Finn Jones in the actual series. If you just put all that shit aside, the series is actually pretty good. It's not perfect. It has some flaws like every other series, but it's still pretty damn good. By no means is Iron Fist a failure. So I strongly recommend you guys go check the series out. Overall, I'll give Iron Fist an 8.5 out of 10. So I'm really down to see what they do next for season 2. I think they have a lot of potential here. Overall, guys, if you enjoyed the video, just smack the like button. As always, I appreciate it. If you have any comments or questions, leave them down below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Also, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button to see more content like this. I'll see you guys next time.